So the Financial and Fiscal Commission says government could have been ambitious in its response to COVID-19. The Commission is tasked with advising government on fiscal matters, presenting its recommendations to Parliament on the 2021-22 Division of Revenue. The Commission warned that South Africa is not at the end of this current economic crisis. While interventions are in place to cushion the impact of the pandemic, the Commission says government should have done better. For more on this, let's bring in the chair of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. That's Professor Daniel Plaatjies, who joins us via our video link. Prof, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM report. Let's start by addressing that issue I alluded to in my introduction. What do we mean when they say government could have been more ambitious? What exactly does that entail?
Well, what we've seen is that there's been a reprioritization of current public spending, in fact, current revenue within the public sector. And through that reprioritization has been a cut of certain services, cut of certain funding for certain programs. And as a result, our concern is that there's not really new money that's coming into the system. There's talk about a fiscal stimuli to the system, but if you deal with what we see is that this is rather a relief package or rescue package to help households and businesses to deal with the shock that has been presented by COVID, but also the shock that's been presented by a sovereign debt, sovereign ratings downgrade. So that we've seen that. So this is not really a stimulus package. And we feel that because of the reprioritization and because of the net effect that will have on funds for years going forward, there should have been a reconsideration exactly as to what new funds the government needs to bring into the system.
If we are to bring new funds into the system, the funds need to come from somewhere, somehow. I think you'll also agree that the economy has been in the doldrums even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Where would you imagine those funds would be sourced from?
The idea was initially that the president was talking about a stimulus package. And part of that stimulus package was then to be able to look at where do we need certain tax cuts? What is the relationship that's going to have with the Reserve Bank, especially in terms of the 200 billion rands? But it was also the idea of making sure that we're dealing with the impaired fiscal space that we're having. So there's a number of interventions that needed to be undertaken. And what we've experienced is that no new funds has come into the system. Out of the 500 that we initially spoke about, at a certain time, there was only 95 billion rand for new money. So there was a need to think quite harder, but also to find ways in terms of what we're talking about, the solidarity levy, at the last time of conversation, to look at how the private sector, especially how we can get more billions of rands from the rich to be able to help in this instance, because this is about all of us.
Right. And do you feel there's room to still ask for more money from the rich? I mean, a big argument that's been made in the past is that, everybody has dug into their pockets as much as they can. And so even though we're looking at a reality where it is the poorest that bear the brunt of South Africa's economic woes, is there still room to allow the rich to cushion that blow, do you think?
Indeed. It is, I think the whole idea of solidarity is that we're all in this. And that requires, because remember, in South Africa we have deep levels of inequality. We have a skewed economy. We have an economy that needs a real structural transformation. And as a result, what needs to happen is that we need to look at how the rich can actually help us cushion the blow that we've experienced out of COVID. If that doesn't happen, we might find ourselves with greater problems going forward. And those problems could create serious instability within the country because people are hungry, there's lots of unemployment, and some jobs will be lost, will never come back, and there's a need for greater innovation and public investment, especially around economic and social infrastructure, to provide better opportunities to be more innovative. We need collaboration from those who from the top billionaires within the country to assist us. Looking at loans and borrowing, and which it has already started. But going forward, we're going to need quite a what some would call, initially the president spoke about a war plan. I call it a Ramaphosa plan. It could be a Marshall Plan. In fact, maybe we should go back to the real RDP, the Reconstruction and Development Plan that was initially conceptualized during the Mandela years, and rebuild South Africa and find innovative ways to rebuild the economy.
That's interesting you mentioned the RDP plan, because I remember in some instances there had been questions around the plan itself. Where do you think the disjuncture is? Is it the implementation of that plan, or how the plan was conceptualized, that appears to be problematic?
Well, remember during a conversation in the early 90s, when President Mandela said that nobody's going to stand in the way of this Reconstruction and Development Plan, there were discussions then with global institutions, and the view was taken that at the time there needs to be another option taken, and that's why GEAR came into place. So it had to do firstly with the resource base. Secondly, it had to do with the land question and mining issues. Thirdly, it had to do as to how do we deal with the whole question of inequality. The government at that time then decided that the high road to take on this is to do the GEAR policy. But I think we're all at a point where we just need to think differently. We need to be more innovative. And it's probably, I'm saying it's conceivable, based on the statement that the president himself made about a war plan, that is probably, it's now the time to go probably back to the Reconstruction and Development Plan and see what were the options that this plan were providing relative to where we found ourselves now. In fact, we becoming much more poorer. There's lots of slippage of middle class getting into poverty. We have mass unemployment within the country. So we need to start thinking about localized product value chain. And our own manufacturing, we need to be much more innovative and look at how do we actually build a new economy in South Africa? How do we restructure the economy and provide greater ownership to the citizens of the country? In fact, there's also the argument that can be made. We got SMEs. Isn't it time that we follow the Scandinavian example that the citizens become shareholders in our own SMEs? And in that we build collectively the resource base of our institutions, but also to better share the wealth of the country going forward. But the reprioritization is also, in many ways, a hollowing out of resources of the future. And we need to think much more harder. How do we do this as a country?
Yeah. And as we, I guess, go through the different iterations and combinations of what could be done, many experts, I guess the phrase that's used is that we're at a fiscal cliff. I mean, how much of an accurate representation of our situation is that really? I mean, it makes for a great headline, but is it an exaggeration, or do you really feel that we're at the cusp of a catastrophe, at least insofar as the economy is concerned?
Well, I don't think it's an exaggeration. We see the poverty numbers increasing. We see that, remember, part of the economy is also, a key element of the economy is consumption spending. If people don't have income, if they don't get salaries, if households are not able to actively participate in the economy through employment, then we're having a problem. We saw over 2 months additional 3 million people becoming unemployed. So the numbers of the unemployment is growing fast. We see hardened poverty. One would expect that greater interventions need to be made around social relief, using existing channels of relief, whether it's food security, food parcels, but just find a way to cushion the majority of our citizens, the historic disadvantage always in this instance against the hardships, socioeconomic hardships, against poverty, against hunger, and there's no disposable income that people no longer have. And we need to find innovative ways. That's why I'm raising the point. We need to invest in local production value chains. We need to start doing our own things here in South Africa. It's time for that.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully those calls reach the places where they need to. Let me thank you for your time for now. Certainly appreciate your insights. Professor Daniel Plaatjies is the chair of the Financial and Fiscal Commission in South Africa.